there was a massacre. The type of person that created this murder is a devil.
Newlyweds, brutally gunned down.
This is something very personal. A lot of rounds were fired at them.
A world of unexpected suspects and secret deals.
Did this family feud that they have rise to the level of a sister killing her brother?
The life insurance policy was for $1 million. If something happened to one, the other would be paid.
You have somebody involved with an outlaw biker gang. Perhaps they owed money to this gang, and the killing was retribution.
The truth will be revealed.
There's the psychopathic undercurrent that was driving him, plus entitlement and greed. We have a cocktail of the most volatile motivators.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Wilmington, Delaware, the largest city in the state, where some of America's wealthiest entrepreneurs live as modern-day royalty.
The DuPont Chemical Corporation was founded right on the banks of the river here. And Wilmington became sort of a prosperous little small city. It's still a city with a lot of wealth. And in the suburbs of the city, there's some of the richest people in the world. Wilmington's also on the corridor of I-95, so it's on a pipeline of drugs. So consequently, there's a lot of drug gangs that popped up.
Wilmington itself has gotten some negative press. It was recently referred to as Murder Town in a Nationwide article.
Wilmington was the third most violent city of its size in the country. But it's really based on 4 small neighborhoods. If you go there at night and you're involved in anything illegal, your life could be in jeopardy.
Early one Sunday morning, Wilmington's violence crosses over into an unexpected part of town, the Paladin Club condominiums.
Newcastle County 911.
I just heard arguing, and the last thing I heard was what the F, and then 3 gunshots.
Newcastle County 911.
We need help. My neighbor is laying on the ground. She's hurt, right? She has blood all over her body.
So at 1:16 a.m., 911 received a call about a woman down on the ground, apparently shot, very bloody scene. Police arrived and they saw this woman. She was shot at close range. She was shot 4 times. She was shot in the face and other parts of her body.
The victim is 39-year-old Olga Connell.
Olga is this sweet, very striking woman. She's outgoing. She likes to socialize. She grew up in Russia, in this coastal city. In her mid-20s, she decided to come to the United States.
At the crime scene, police soon make another grisly discovery.
There's a male off to the left of the front door. He was lying face down, clutching his cell phone. He had multiple gunshot wounds, and there were cartridge casings around his body. With close proximity to the cartridge casings, you could tell that someone stood over top of him and fired.
The second victim is Olga's husband, mechanic and entrepreneur Joe Connell.
My Joey, he was a sweet boy. Joey was very active. He was interested in so many things growing up. He had a wonderful personality. He made everybody around him happy. He was special.
The Connells are newlyweds who got married 3 months earlier.
Joe was a rugged motorcycle driving mechanic who liked to eat takeout all the time. And then he met Olga, who was sophisticated and gorgeous and liked to go out to restaurants and fancy stuff. So they blended that. She would do what he liked to do. He did what she liked to do. They just enjoyed each other.
Oh, they were happy.
Heading up the investigation into the murders of Joe and Olga Connell are Sergeants Jamie Leonard and Justin Breslin.
At the crime scene, Olga had her keys in the front door. Her phone was on the sidewalk. All her jewelry was still on. They had car keys. They had everything.
We could tell fairly quickly that it wasn't a robbery or anything like that.
This is something very personal. A lot of rounds were fired at them. Olga clearly made it to the door, and she starts taking fire. And based upon the way he fell, which was face down, Joe attempted to flee, but was unsuccessful.
There was 2 different calibers of ammunition. It was 9mm and .22 caliber ammunition. It definitely means 2 different weapons. But whether or not there were 2 shooters remains to be known.
This is often the telltale marker of what we call a team killing, which is 2 or more people united in a single act of murder.
This wasn't something that just randomly happened. It was something that appeared to be planned.
There's an empty parking spot directly in front of their building. And in that parking spot, off to the side, there's a live round of ammunition. So was the shooter parked in this parking spot? And if they weren't, why didn't Joe and Olga park directly in front of their building? Because it had been raining. So the natural deduction in that was that this particular spot was occupied by the person or people responsible for this. This case was unique in the sense that there were 2 victims. We deal with and have seen drug-related killings or killings that were the result of a robbery gone bad. But the manner in which they were shot is not something we customarily see in here, and that is an execution. They were executed in front of that building. Someone came there to do a specific task, was successful in that task, and then fled.
To find the Connells' killer, detectives will need to reconstruct the final 24 hours of their lives.
So police know that between 1:16 a.m. and 1:19 a.m., there were the sounds of gunshots, and that provides a window for when this might have occurred.
Timelines are important, generally speaking, because they give you a starting point. We have the homicide of Joe and Olga Connell, and then we work backwards. And in working backwards, we need to figure out who Joe and/or Olga were talking to, who they might have been with, who they had seen before they were killed.
To help fill out the couple's final hours, investigators speak with Joe's mother, Mickey.
Olga is going to be 39 years old. So that night, they went to dinner with some of their friends.
There was food, there was drink, and it was, all their close friends. Everybody left around 12:30, and then Joe and Olga hung around for a little bit. Maybe they had a last drink, and they left around 1 o'clock.
Detectives ask Mickey if she knows of anyone with a grudge against Olga or Joe. She offers up an unexpected tale of bitter sibling rivalry.
I have 4 children, and everyone grew up in Delaware. Kelly is the youngest, then comes Joe.
I was closest with Joey growing up. He was a jokester, prankster, did a lot of pranks to me. I grew up always knowing Joey was the favorite. It just is how it was. He got everything he wanted, no matter what it was. It was always given to him.
Detectives learned that years earlier, when Kelly got married, her mother gave her a diamond ring. The family heirloom soon became a point of contention between the siblings.
Joey said, Mom, I would really like to marry Olga. And I was wondering what you did with your ring. I said, I gave him to Kelly. And he said, do you think you can get him back from Kelly? So I got the ring. I gave it to Joe. So I didn't see where Kelly would really need that ring at that time because she's divorced. And Joey asked me, and I would do anything for Joey. When Kelly found out this was bad,
It was a $20,000 ring. I mean, I was really angry. I just felt kicked in the teeth.
Furious, Kelly confronts Joe and Olga.
she made texts to Olga asking for the ring back. Then Olga was upset. That's when the fight started. Joe was livid.
Joe said, I don't want anything to ever do with you or your children again. Stay the F away. They were getting nasty.
When the couple's home is burglarized shortly before the murder, all eyes turn towards Kelly.
In July of that year, someone had pried open their front door and stolen some jewelry, a laptop, and fled.
Joe thought Kelly did it because he was telling people. And some of the family said, oh, Kelly probably did it. All arrows pointed to Kelly. So I was caught in the middle of thinking, did she or did she not?
It's not uncommon for family to kill family, but did it happen? In this case, Sergeant Breslin and I had to get in there and figure out exactly what happened.
In the brutal murder of Joe and Olga Connell, detectives zero in on a surprising suspect. Joe's sister, Kelly.
Joe, Kelly, and Olga had been fighting over this ring, and that burglary. The feud intensified, and Olga tried to get what we call here in Delaware a protection from abuse order, or you may know as a restraining order. The feud was certainly something that could come to violence.
When there's an application for a restraining order, it tells me some conflict has escalated to the point that maybe one party or both are feeling that aggression or violence is a possible option.
Did this family feud that they have rise to the level of a sister wanting to have her brother killed? Or possibly physically killing her brother?
Detectives bring Joe's sister, Kelly, into the station for questioning.
Kelly's reaction when we told her what happened to her brother, it weighed heavy on her. We would have to go through 15 minutes allowing her to compose herself every time we talked to her. But her reaction could be faked.
With suspicion swirling around Kelly, police ask about her whereabouts the night of the murders.
I'm home recovering from surgery at this time. I'm just home, focusing on me, focusing on my kids, brokenhearted that Joey's not there for me.
Detectives dig into Kelly's story to confirm whether she's telling the truth or lying.
We learned that just prior to her brother's death, Kelly had had a medical procedure done that kind of rendered her not necessarily bedridden, but she didn't go out of the house very often. She was weak, she was tired. We're looking through her phone and see she's communicating with people that night, telling them, hey, I'm at home tonight, or yeah, I'm not leaving the house. And also, GPS tower locations show that she was where she said she was. On top of all that, we know she had no means to pay someone to do this. This double homicide. If it was a paid contract, it's not cheap. At this point in time, Sergeant Breslin and I were confident that Kelly's not the driving force behind the death of her brother and his wife.
Before leaving, Kelly reveals there's someone she's always been suspicious of. Joe's business partner, Chris Rivers.
Kelly was not fond of Chris Rivers. She had nothing good to say about Chris.
Chris and Joe partnered at this one shop called CNS Automotive. Chris bought this old Jiffy Lube, and he converted it into a high-tech auto repair shop, and it was very successful. Joe goes to work at the shop. Joe was a good mechanic, and he's reliable, and Chris asked Joe to be his partner.
Looking for answers, detectives bring Chris Rivers down to the station for questioning.
Talking to Chris Rivers, you could see that he was visibly nervous. He was breathing heavily, and you could see his pulse in his neck. We told him we were there to speak to him about his business partner.
Early this morning, we received a call about a shooting in Paladin Club where Olga and Joe live, and both of them are killed.
Are you serious? Do they know who did it?
Chris's reaction to Joe and Olga's death raises a red flag.
Genuine grief just didn't really manifest itself at all. I gave him a minute, kind of stepped away and watched from the monitoring room to see if maybe it's just because there's just like machismo. He doesn't want to break down and cry in front of me. It's just never changed. It was this fake, repetitive, oh my God, oh my God.
Oh my God.
It varies case by case what reveals a suspect who's actually committed the crime will sort of unveil for investigators. Some will go too far, will go over the top, excessive grief. Some become too restrained. Everyone deals with grief differently, so you don't want to focus too much on a grieving person's behavior.
Despite his odd reaction, Chris is forthcoming.
He told us Joe had done a little time in prison after an incident at a bar where he brandished a shotgun.
He was convicted at a jury trial of firearms charges, some aggravated menacing charges, and ends up with a mandatory prison sentence.
After getting out of prison, Joe tried to turn his life around.
Joe was attempting to do everything right. He got this job. He's staying out of trouble by all accounts. There's no record of him getting into any sort of probation trouble after his initial prison term. He seems to be on the right track.
But Chris says as the business grew, the partnership started to fall apart, especially after Joe hired Olga as their receptionist.
He then goes on to say that Olga works there too, and they're always together, and they leave early together. Ultimately, Chris says that Joe had become a problem around the shop. He wasn't pulling his weight. He wasn't working full hours.
So you said he wouldn't come to work. What was his explanation to that?
He said he had stuff to do, running around, had meetings to go to with Olga. I mean, whenever I wasn't there, I'd still hear stories, people stopping by, he disappearing.
With tension at play between Chris and Joe, detectives ask him where he was the night of the murders.
Now we need to kind of establish this timeline. When's the last time you spoke to Joe? When's the last time you guys had met up or you socialized? So he begins to give me more or less a play-by-play of his whereabouts.
Chris was supposed to show up for a celebration of Olga's birthday. However, Chris never showed up. He never made it to the bar.
He was late getting done from work, and then he had to get his child's mom dinner. Then he says that he went home. So I asked Chris for times, are you having any communication with him back and forth? He said, yeah, we were texting back and forth related to, are you coming down to this party?
According to Chris, at 11:38, Joe texted, saying he and Olga would only be out for another hour. So Chris decides to stay home for the night.
Chris said that he was home, and he said that he had surveillance to support his alibi at the time of the murder.
So you go from the shop to your house, or?
I have video at my house.
Oh, you do? Okay. What time do you get to your house?
I'd say around 11 o'clock.
Chris told us to take my surveillance cameras that I have both inside and outside of my house.
Detectives dig into Chris's alibi for the night of the murders.
So we have more or less this timeline from surveillance cameras and Joe's phone that shows this communication between he and Chris. We talked to his child's mother, who said, yeah, he came in about 11 with dinner. We had good, quality, credible information. Chris was home when Joe and Olga were killed. That was clear. He got home about 11, and he left the following morning.
With his alibi confirmed for the time of the killings, Chris tells police he has some information he's been holding back.
Chris says that Joe used a lot of steroids. And Joe sells steroids from my shop. Chris says to me, it makes me mad, and I'm angry about it, and I confronted him about it. And he ultimately says to me, I don't want these guys coming after me. And I said, what guys are you referring to? He's like, well, this has got to be about steroids.
As detectives consider that the murders could be related to Joe's illegal side venture, Chris makes his most startling disclosure yet.
Chris had offered up that Joe was involved with or a member of a outlaw motorcycle club called the Pagans. Chris had suggested that maybe the Pagans could be responsible for this. We look at the fact that, one, that Joe and Olga were executed. Two, we know now from Chris that Joe was selling steroids. And now enter this outlaw motorcycle club.
So there's always questions when you hear somebody who's involved in illegal activity and also involved with an outlaw biker gang. Perhaps they owed money to this gang, and the killing was retribution for the debt owed.
For what we know about their organization. Killing, drug dealing, all these things kind of fit in with the way they operate. So we're thinking that, yeah, this actually is something to follow.
These are money-driven organizations at the end of the day. Outlaw motorcycle gangs dabble in enough forms of crime. If you were to cross them and steal from them, you wouldn't be in a very good position. And it looks as though Joe may have been in deep to these people.
In the brutal double homicide of Joe and Olga Connell, police are working a new theory that the Newlyweds could have been killed by outlaw motorcycle gang, the Pagans.
Talking to different friends and family members, we found out while Joe was in prison, he became acquainted with the Pagans Motorcycle Club, and they became close. And Joe would associate with the Pagans.
We loved all of them because they were a group of riders. When he came out of prison, they liked to ride together. I knew a couple of them, and one of them that really was a good friend of Joe's.
Through their law enforcement sources, the police checked the Pagans to see if there was any beef with Joe. And they assured the police, no, we got no problem with Joe Connell.
But could this be a lie being fed to them by lower-level gang members?
We were able to get in touch with a member of that club who held an authoritative type position. He reiterated to us that Joe was a friend of several of the members there, but that they had nothing to do with his death, that they were as taken aback by it as everyone else. So we were able to close the book on that, at least for the time being.
With the Pagans' lead eliminated, the investigation into the double homicide of Joe and Olga Connell hits a wall.
People that live in Wilmington and around Wilmington were worried about all these shootings. 2 people ended up dead in front of their condo building, and these killers were still walking the streets.
There's the pressure you put on yourself, and also the pressure from these external factors when it comes to narrowing down the suspect. We're working through these theories that we have. So eventually, one of these is going to lead to something.
This is really where commitment and staying focused and having a homicide team that mutually trusts each other is so important. the end of the day, you were working for the victim and the victim's families.
Police widen the scope of their investigation, looking at anyone in the Connells' lives they may have missed who had motive to want them dead.
We also sent out a media request saying, hey, anything you guys know about these people, can you please call us? And we were getting anonymous tips about a guy named Harry. He knew Joe. He would be up at CNS Automotive, Chris and Joe's auto shop from time to time.
Searching Harry's name in their database, detectives discover he has a long rap sheet.
Harry Cook does have, in fact, a history with criminal activity. And also, he lives really close to the scene of these homicides. So we focus our attention on him.
With Harry in their crosshairs, police haul him down to the station for questioning.
It started off a little adversarial, and Harry Cook tells us, I'm not speaking to you. We need to figure out what's happening and figure out his whereabouts around the time of this homicide. We ultimately end up with a search warrant at his house and his phone records. But there's nothing that's really out of the ordinary.
The search doesn't turn up anything connected to the murders. Looking for information, investigators question Harry's girlfriend.
And she says, look, I don't really know a lot about Harry's business dealings, but I do know on the day that Joe and Olga were killed, Harry was in Pittsburgh. He went up there with some friends to watch a Steelers game. So we trekked up to Pittsburgh, found him on video, and realized, okay, this guy has this alibi.
Once Harry is cleared as a suspect, he agrees to cooperate with detectives.
He was really forthcoming with information about what he knew. He told us that he was an investor in CNS Automotive. He invested over $150,000 into that business.
He told the police, Chris is always looking for partners to put cash infusion into the shop. His father had put $325,000 into the business.
Detectives question why Chris Rivers, who's running a successful business, would be in need of so much cash.
Harry said that Chris was blowing through money because he was buying drugs.
He's spending, by some accounts, like $4,000 a week just on prescription painkillers. He was doing a lot of them. 100 oxycodone pills like twice a week, and sometimes cocaine. So Chris had a very expensive drug habit, and he had a habit of not paying his bills. He had debts, and he owed a lot of people a lot of money.
He always told everyone Joe Connell was spending everything, living lavishly, going out to eat, buying expensive Mercedes. Or in actuality, Chris Rivers was the one spending all the money.
As investigators comb through the automotive shop's financials, they make a crucial new discovery.
We found out there was a large insurance policy that Chris and Joe Connell placed on one another for the business. So they essentially insured one another. If something happened to one, the other would be paid. The life insurance policy that Chris Rivers had on Joe Connell was for $1 million.
Chris is reported to have a significant debt. It's possible that he could resort to desperate measures in an effort to pay this debt or to obtain even more financial resources. It certainly wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for somebody to kill to obtain that money.
Police can now see a clear motive for Chris to kill his partner, Joe: money.
Harry said that several months before, Chris was visibly upset. He'd been crying, he was angry, and he went on about how Joe was taking money, and Chris couldn't pay the mortgage, and he couldn't buy food for his kid, and kind of like doom and gloom. Chris had been bad-mouthing Joe a lot. Then Harry says that Chris makes this really odd comment to him. Says, I'm just gonna have Joe killed.
After a series of false starts and dead ends, investigators circle back to a previous suspect in Olga and Joe Connell's murder, Joe's business partner, Chris Rivers.
Chris Rivers was interesting because there was money and greed, drugs, but we have good information that he is at home when the homicide happens. You always have to keep that in your mind, that I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole when we should be over here, looking at other possibilities.
Looking for evidence connecting Chris to the Connells murders, police conduct a search of Joe and Chris's automotive shop.
We find steroids in the shop. And then Chris comes back to our police station.
Chris Rivers described the steroids that were at the shop as being Joe's. He specifically told us that they were there. And he said, I told him to get that stuff out of the shop, but he keeps selling it. And
the decision been made amongst us that we're gonna charge Chris with the possession of these steroids that were in his shop. So I inform him of that, and he requests an attorney and says, I'm not talking to you anymore.
With Chris refusing to talk, investigators subpoena his cell phone records. They uncover calls and text messages deleted around the time of the Connells murder.
We have Chris's call detail records, who he was calling, who he was texting. Chris had deleted a lot of communication between he and an unknown phone number. We learned that that number is associated with a guy named Joshua Bay.
Joshua Bay and Chris Rivers are texting back and forth prior to the homicide.
Digging into Joshua Bay's background, investigators learn he has a checkered past.
He's a felon who had gun convictions. Most recently, he was on probation for passing counterfeit $100 bills at the casino south of Wilmington.
When you look at the cases in which he was involved in, he always made some sort of deal. He always offered up some sort of information to help him. And we thought maybe that would be beneficial to us.
Detectives haul Joshua Bay down to the station for questioning.
The first time I talked to Josh, I just want to know, hey man, how do you know Chris Rivers? Do you know Chris Rivers? You know, we couldn't even get past that. No, I have no idea who he is. Then he said, oh, he's my mechanic. Okay, why were you talking to him at 11 o'clock at night on the 21st? I must have butt dialed him.
So they go to Bay. Well, why did you call him several times the night of this murder? And he called you too. Bay comes back and has another story. So the police say, well, no, that's not true either, is it?
He essentially lied repeatedly to Sergeant Leonard during that interview. And he was charged with providing a false statement.
And he admits that he sells Chris pills and sometimes cocaine.
Believing Chris and Joshua were working together, investigators dig into Joshua's phone records, looking for evidence of a conspiracy.
On the night of the murder, you see Chris Rivers communicating with Josh Bay, and then Josh Bay in turn communicating with someone else.
And that number came back to a guy named Dominique Benson. Dominique was known to law enforcement and to other people around Wilmington as being a contract hitman.
Investigators also learn that the hitman Dominique often worked with another man named Aaron Thompson.
He said there are 2 paid assassins that will do hits for $10,000 apiece. And he had named Benson and Thompson as these guys.
Working to establish there was a conspiracy to kill the Connells, investigators also searched through Dominique Benson's phone records.
We found this communication between all these people that we're talking about up to this point. Joe, Chris, Josh, Dominique, is all linear. You see that after Joe talks to Chris, and Chris talks to Josh, Josh talks to Dom. Dom then calls the guy named Aaron Thompson. The information was all starting to kind of come together, but it all hinged upon Josh putting context to this conversation. The only person that sat right in the middle of all this was Joshua Bay. He'd be able to tie the front and the back end together for us. But Josh isn't moving on his position that he does not have any information to offer. So we're dead in the water from this point forward unless Joshua Bay can provide us some information.
Investigators suspect Olga and Joe Connell were killed in a conspiracy, masterminded by Joe's business partner, Chris Rivers, to collect on a $1 million life insurance policy. Rivers' acquaintance, Joshua Bay, is key to cracking the case, but police can't get him to talk.
Frequently, the low-hanging fruit, or in this case, somebody in the middle, if you can get to them first, you can work the chain of the conspiracy up from there.
So we are preparing for Josh Bay providing a false statement to law enforcement trial. Sergeant President and I went up to the courthouse to process Josh on his arrest warrant. At the courthouse, Josh offered us basically a full confession in what his involvement was in this entire incident.
Josh finally collapses and gives in to what we call death by 1,000 cuts. The investigators in this case were relentless, and ultimately that proved to be too much for this guy.
When detectives question Joshua Bay, he says to understand his role in Joe and Olga's murders, he has to go back to when he met Chris.
From time to time, you go to CNS Automotive, have his car worked on. Josh had been in a car accident, had been prescribed oxycodone. Chris says something to Josh to the effect of, hey, do you sell those? Josh says, yeah, these are prescribed, but I can get you whatever you need. So they begin to forge this relationship based solely upon the sale of drugs.
Over the years, Chris starts confiding in Joshua about his business partnership.
Chris says Joe steals money. Joe doesn't come to work. Joe drives fancy cars. Then Chris asked Josh something to the effect of, hey, you know anybody that could take him out? And Josh says, I was a little taken aback. I'm wondering if they're trying to set me up. So I laugh it off. And a couple months later, Chris says, no, I'm serious. What are we talking about? I'll pay whatever. Chris and Josh go back and forth on price. And Josh tells us that he went so far as to ask Chris, well, why do we have to kill Olga? And he says that Chris said, I don't know what will they have. I want to make sure she doesn't get half this business. They ultimately decide that Dominique's going to do the killing with Aaron Thompson. From that point on, Joe and Olga became more or less hunted.
Joshua reveals that prior to the murder, Chris orchestrated the break-in at the Connells' home, then worked to shift the blame.
He had Josh Bay burglarize Joe's home. And then Chris had a burner phone. He was sending these threatening texts from me to Joe and Olga to the point where they tried to get a restraining order. Chris was fueling this fight between Joe and I. I didn't know all this was going on.
With Joshua's confession, detectives are now able to fill in the final 24 hours of Joe and Olga Connell's lives.
Josh says on the day of the actual killing, he reaches out to Chris. Chris says something to him like, tonight's the night, 7 o'clock, they're going out to a restaurant.
On September 21st at 7 p.m., the Connells head out to celebrate Olga's birthday with friends.
So at 8 p.m., Chris is at the shop. He texts Joe to find out if they're at dinner, and Chris talked about that he would actually go. But then at 11, Chris arrived home with his food for his girlfriend. At 11:38, Joe texts and says, look, we're gonna stay about another hour. We're having a good time. At 11:43, 5 minutes after Joe texts Chris texts Bay, and then Bay follows up with a text to Benson, and Benson follows up with a text to Aaron Thompson. So they're all on the same page before the murders.
Olga and Joe leave the restaurant at 1 a.m. and head straight home.
At 1:15, they arrive home. They walk up to the door. Olga puts her keys into the lock and goes to open it. and someone started firing. Joe tried to take off, someone ran after him and shot at him, got him down, and fired point blank in the back of his head.
That was horrible. He died hating me. Yep. It's the worst. My family really believed for a long time that I had something to do with this. That really hurts me. It was awful. Chris had all of us fooled. At the end, he took the heart of our family away from us.
Joshua Bay, the middleman, pleads guilty to conspiracy and is sentenced to 5 years. Hitman Aaron Thompson is convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He's sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 45 years. His partner, Dominique Benson, receives 5 years for conspiracy.
These guys were foolish enough to use their own phones. But thankfully for us, they did, because taking the evidence that we have and meshing them into this timeline, we were able to push the whole thing together and see it through to successful prosecution.
Finally, mastermind Chris Rivers is convicted of conspiracy and 2 counts of first-degree murder. He's sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 50 years.
This crime, I think, speaks to, number 1, the psychopathic undercurrent that was driving him. But number 2, entitlement and greed. And there's really no other way to slice it.
I want people to remember Joe and Olga and about the tragedy that happened to them and how horrific it was. It was a massacre. I want everybody to know that the type of person that created this murder is a devil.
It's good to know that there's some sort of closure for their family. It's not hanging unsolved, but it'll never heal the wound of it all.
When you love somebody, make sure you tell them you love them. Make up with everybody. Don't go to sleep angry. You might never get the chance again. You know, to tell them you love them. That's a hard thing to deal with.
Kelly and I are very close now. Went through a whole lot, and thank God. But we missed everything about Joe and Olga.
This was definitely a frenzy. Essentially, the person went berserk.
A vicious slaying.
People were terrified. People need a reason that bad things happen.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
They were sisters, but there was no sisterly love.
I'm just thinking, what do I do if he freaks out?
There was a lot of hate. There was a lot of discontent within that family circle.
The truth will be revealed.
What stood out to me as this crime scene is there was no rhyme or reason. It just didn't make sense. If he did this, he needs to pay for it.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. On the banks of the St. Joseph River sits Niles, Michigan, a community brimming with civic pride.
So Niles it's a small town,
Everybody knows everybody. It's the kind of community where you could meet a stranger and you both know the same person. And fortunately, we don't have a lot of violent crime here.
If crime happens, people are more than willing to help you. People respect police. Yes sir, no sir. Here, people get involved.
But on one cold February afternoon, something so shocking happens, no one knows what to do.
Yes, County.
This is a 911 transfer. The gentleman is saying there's been a shooting.
Okay, where's the suspect at?
There's no suspect. Their door was open. We were trying to find them all morning. They were supposed to be at work, and I walked in the house, and they've been shot.
We received a 911 call from a father who says that his son and his daughter-in-law are deceased. He thinks it's a homicide.
Okay, sir?
Yes.
Have you been inside the house?
I have.
Okay. Are they injured or are they deceased?
They're deceased. Oh, my God.
I immediately called one of the troopers on a cell phone, and he said, "You need to get over here."
The victims are Carolyn and John Tarwacki, two beloved musicians who live with their nephew, Keelan.
John and Carolyn met late in life. They met online. They were just in a great place in their life because they had found each other, they were happily married.
Carolyn was a good soul, as I put it. She used to pick up old music instruments, and she would repair them and try to help kids who couldn't afford an instrument. And John was a Navy veteran. Hard workers, both of them.
Tasked with investigating their deaths are Detectives Fabian Suarez of the Michigan State Police and local detective Kristen Daly, who has lived in this community for 20 years.
When we arrived there, that's when the light bulb went off for me that, oh, these are people that I know. My sister-in-law was very good friends with Carolyn in high school. So there was an immediate connection there, and I felt a lot more responsibility.
Detectives begin analyzing the crime scene, trying to imagine what might have taken place.
We walk into the foyer area of the house. Obviously, we take a quick moment, we stand, we scan. I can see John Tarwacki. He's got stab wounds on his back. We walk over to the right, there's a living room. We look in there and we see Carolyn. We look to the left, there's a bathroom there. One of the first things I notice is there's a towel on the floor with hair clippings, and there's a razor on the sink. So to me, it tells me he was shaving his head. My gut feeling is the killer was confronted by John. He takes the first shot, he hits John right in the jaw. He shoots again, John throws up his arm, and then he turns and like he's trying to escape, and he collapses right there. So now John is out of the picture. Now the killer can focus his attention on Carolyn.
At the time that you first looked at her, it was almost hard to tell exactly what had happened to her. She had been badly beaten. Being beaten is usually very immediate. It usually dictates that that's somebody that you know really well and you're really, really angry at when you see that level of injury and that level of violence visited upon somebody. And later it was determined that she was both stabbed and shot. And that's an extreme level of violence against the nicest person that you literally would ever meet. It made absolutely no sense.
To find out who ruthlessly killed this loving couple, police must reconstruct the final 24 hours of the Tarwackis' lives.
A timeline's important in every homicide case. You have to know where all your players are in any given moment to create an alibi or to break an alibi, to set your timeline so you can discover When was their vulnerability? When did the murder occur?
Investigators start building John and Carolyn's timeline by interviewing the person who found them, John's father.
When I first met John Tarwacki, Sr., obviously he was very distraught. How else could you be? You just walked in, you find your son and your daughter-in-law murdered. He said John and Carolyn had an 8 a.m. meeting at the high school. They never showed up. This is not like Carolyn. She will not miss work. She will not miss appointments, anything like that. So the school called Quinlan and Babis, which is where they worked, and said, Carolyn never showed up. What happened?
John's sister worked for the company too, so they called John's father, like, can you go check and see what's going on?
He, in turn, said he tried calling the house, he tried calling the cell phones, and nothing happened, so he decided to get in the car and go knock on the door.
Hoping to flush out the Tarwacki's timeline further, detectives reach out to Carolyn's mother, Sharon.
Sharon tells me that she talked with Carolyn on the phone that morning. She was having some issues with her computer, so she was just venting some frustration to her mom. Just a normal touch and base with your mom in the morning. Sharon said there was nothing about that phone call that made her suspicious.
Detectives pull Sharon's cell phone records and verify that the call started at 6:10 a.m. and lasted exactly 12 minutes.
The last time she talks to her mother is at 6:22, says goodbye, not realizing either one that it's the last time.
But what happened after she hung up with her mother is still a mystery. Knowing that Carolyn was on her computer that morning gives them something to work with. Investigators dig into her laptop logs.
Carolyn logged onto the computer at 6:43 a.m. and then 7:03, the computer goes dormant, meaning that there's no longer any interaction with the keyboard.
Every time you hit a key on any device, there is a record of that. And when we see habitual use and ongoing keystrokes and then a sudden stoppage, that stoppage point serves as a great start for what happened next. Were they interrupted? Were they pulled away from the computer, or were they actually murdered at that particular time?
Based on when the computer goes dormant, Carolyn and John could have been killed any time between 7:03 a.m. and just before their bodies were found at 12:45 p.m. The bodies are sent off for autopsy, and the forensics team starts scouring the house for potential murder weapons.
We're looking for a knife, and we're looking for a gun at that point.
We don't know if he used one of the kitchen knives. So we took all the knives that looked like they could have been used for the murders, and we sent those to the medical examiner.
As they continue to work their way through the crime scene, investigators struggle to come up with a rational theory for the murders.
What stood out to me as this crime scene is there was no rhyme or reason. There was no sign of any forced entry whatsoever. There were valuables laying around. You could think it was a breaking and entering. Someone had gone in to steal things, but there was computers, there were laptops, iPads, cash money laying around. There was even prescription drugs in the medicine cabinets.
It's not until they make their way to the back of the house that the first clue into the identity of the killer reveals itself.
From where we're standing, I can hear a dog going crazy, and it turns out this is Wrigley, a 200-pound mastiff.
The Tarwackis had a large dog. It was ginormous, and it was on the back porch area. And so in their kitchen, you turned and you could either go down the basement or you can go out into a back porch.
Once we get to the back door, that's when we see footprints. One set of footprints coming in, one set of footprints coming out.
The footprints showed that somebody had entered and exited through the back door, which was unusual because they would have had to get past that dog. and that dog was incredibly protective of Carolyn. So normally, if you are a stranger and you open someone's back porch door and you are greeted by a large Mastiff, you turn around and walk away. You don't continue to enter the home. And if it's a stranger, why is the level of violence on Carolyn so great? That told us that it was somebody that they knew.
Now, they're hoping this path will lead them to the killer's doorstep.
You have to work fast, you gotta work furiously, because if he did it once and he did it twice, he can definitely do it again.
Investigators believe that the rage-fueled homicide of Carolyn and John Tarwacki was an intentional act, committed by someone who knew them.
A crime like this could be really devastating for a small community. The word would get out, and it would likely take over the town within a few hours. There would be a sense of, we're all in danger, who's next?
The only piece of hard evidence investigators have from the crime scene is a trail of footprints at the back of the house.
Well, we're pretty sure there's one killer. There's only one set of footprints.
The stride on the way in was short, like a normal walking stride, and the stride on the way out was wider, like a running stride. It tells us that, when he approached the house, he was calm, and when he left the house, he was agitated and fleeing because he had just committed the murders.
Once we get photographs, they are able to get us a good shoe size and a very good tread pattern.
We could actually look at the picture and see 12 in the shoe impression, so we knew it was a size 12 shoe. We were able to confirm that it was a Route 66 shoe that was put out by Kmart, but discontinued in 2008.
So this tells me this person's wearing old shoes that were cheap, basically. It's not a person that has a lot of money, that's spending a lot of money.
Using the footprints, detectives follow the killer's path.
There's an easement. Nobody really knows, unless you're from that area, you're not gonna know that easement there. It's kind of like a power line easement. So those footprints, we were able to follow them away from the house towards what's Yankee Street. So we do a neighborhood canvas. It's just as it's called. We go to every door within a mile, north, west, south, east, every direction. We knock on the doors.
In terms of canvassing, I have said for years that canvassing is the most important and yet simultaneously overlooked area of any investigation. This is the nitty-gritty, this is the unglamorous area of police work that solves cases. You need to find out who was home at the time of the murder, as close to the murder as possible.
One of the apartment's investigators' canvas belongs to Sherry Lince. When they knock on her door, they find her son Keith there as well.
Keith is known to us. He's had many, many problems with law enforcement. We know the Lince family. They're just a lot of family members have been, unfortunately, been on the wrong side of the law.
Detective Suarez consults local detective daily on whether or not she thinks Keith could be a person of interest.
I'd heard the name. I knew that he was in trouble and had been in trouble and had a criminal history, but I wasn't familiar with him like being connected to the Tarwackis at all.
Investigators question Keith about whether he knew the Tarwackis and his whereabouts that morning when they were killed.
Keith Lince says he may have walked past the residence and may have waved at John Tarwacki, but he says no, he doesn't know him. And Sherry Lince, she's able to confirm to us that Keith was at the home at 8 a.m. She said she woke up to go to work and Keith was asleep on the couch. She also is able to alibi him, saying that she actually took Keith to work on the morning of the homicides.
Satisfied with the Lince's accounting of their whereabouts, police move on. And it pays off almost right away.
Later on that morning, we found a neighbor who said, yep, I was outside smoking a cigarette, starting my car up. And that's when I see a young man running down the alleyway. She is positive that was, I believe, at 7:45 a.m. Those footprints were right by her house, maybe 30 feet from her deck. She told us, she goes, you never see anybody going through there at this time of the morning. Nobody ever sees there, and that's what caught her attention.
This new information is critical. Assuming the running man is the killer, investigators are now able to pinpoint when the Tarwackis were murdered.
So as best we could figure, it happened sometime from the time when Carolyn's computer goes dormant to 7:45. So it's almost like a 40-minute window that this murder could have occurred in.
It's an unusual time of day for a double homicide to take place.
It was very brazen. Nobody come and say homicide when everybody is getting ready to go to work. You're taking the chance of being seen. There's too many eyes out. Too many people are awake. Most homicides are going to involve at the time of darkness when not many people are around or you cannot be seen.
The eyewitness didn't get a good look at the man's face, but she says he was tall.
She said that she saw a white male, right around 6 feet tall, hard to pin down his age, between 20 and 30 years old, she thought, wearing a dark, whether it was a jacket or a hoodie, but he had a hood up, and he was running past her house out towards the main road.
The description immediately rings a bell for Detective Daly. It sounds like it could be Keelan, Carolyn and John's teenage nephew, who has been living with them.
I was familiar with Keelan because his younger brother had been on the same T-ball team with my son. So at that point, Fabian's like, oh, well, you can be the one to go talk to him at the school then.
Keelan is the son of Carolyn's sister, Katie, and her husband, David.
Keelan is kind of a combative individual. One of the reasons he was living with John and Carolyn was because he didn't get along with David, and they had fought quite a bit. The fights consisted of a lot of yelling and screaming. So I'm just thinking, you know, what do I do if he freaks out? What do I do if he's actually the suspect and he knows, like, immediately why I'm there?
We know that Keelan lives at the house. He automatically becomes our first suspect because he was probably the last people that saw John and Carolyn alive. So I asked Kristen Daly to conduct the interview because I wanted that female perspective to talk to him, probably get more information. We have to determine as quickly as possible, is he involved? Did he commit the crime? Does he know who committed the crime?
When I got to the school and they brought him out of his classroom, he looked confused. He knew who I was, but he couldn't really figure out why I was there. Keelan's sitting there and he's looking at us. I could just see the conflicting play of emotion on his face. And then Fabian tells him exactly why we were there. He said, John and Carolyn are dead, and we need to talk to you. And Keelan completely melted down. He just completely had a breakdown right there. I said, I need you to go through your morning. I need you to tell me exactly what you did. I need you to tell me exactly, as best you can remember, what time things happened. He told me that his Aunt Carolyn woke him up in the morning, shortly after 6. He leaves the house about 6:30 in the morning, and his grandmother lives 2 doors down from John and Carolyn. So at 6:35, he goes to his grandmother's, talks to her really quick. He grabs some pop and some beef jerky. He's there for maybe not even 10 minutes, if that long, because he catches the bus then at 6:45.
Detective Daly checks Keelan's alibi with his grandmother, Sharon.
Sharon says she gets off the phone with Carolyn at 6:22. Keelan shows up within 5-10 minutes of that phone conversation to Sharon's home. Keelan is calm, he is clean, so he wouldn't have had time to commit those murders, and he would have been a mess physically.
We follow up with the school with the times the bus is there, cameras in the school. We know he walked into the school. We talk to the teachers. We know he walked into the classroom.
He had a backpack, and there was an empty pop bottle like in the outside of his backpack, and also a bag of jerky. So that corroborated his story. Also, there was not a good motive for Keelan. He was in a really good place. John and Carolyn lost their lives, but Keelan lost his future.
With Keelan's whereabouts verified from 6:22 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., detectives conclude he couldn't have killed the Tarwackis. According to Keelan, he hated living with his mother and stepfather and wanted to stay with Carolyn and John permanently.
Once Keelan moved out of the home, his grades picked up, and he really liked it. Obviously, there was no domestic problems. There was no fighting, anything like that in the house. He really liked living there.
Detectives then discover that the Tarwackis had filed for legal guardianship, so Keelan wouldn't have to return to his parents' home. In fact, the attorney had served the papers to Keelan's mother, Katie, just 2 days before the murders took place.
I knew Katie, so I was already familiar with her temperament. She doesn't care what you think about her, and she will tell you exactly what's on her mind. She can come across as very aggressive, very combative, and Katie did not want Carolyn to have guardianship, and she was angry. And knowing Katie's personality and knowing that she could be pretty aggressive, and just seeing the level of violence visited on Carolyn, your mind goes to that first person who's angry. And that circled back to Katie.
The investigation into the brutal double homicide of Carolyn and John Tarwacki is zeroing in on Carolyn's sister, Katie.
When we interview Katie, basically what she tells us, growing up, Carolyn was treated better than she was. They were sisters, but there was no sisterly love. Katie despised Carolyn. She tells us, hey, I didn't kill my sister, but I'm not going to miss her. She told me, I've always believed that Carolyn was trying to take my son because she didn't have kids of her own. And she really believed this, so obviously this raises a flag.
It almost seemed like she didn't care. A normal person, you tell them that their brother or sister has died. It doesn't matter if they fought 20 minutes ago, they're devastated. This is their sibling, this is somebody they love. And she didn't act like your normal sibling to a victim of a horrendous crime. She's a little detached.
When people don't react as expected in a police interview, it immediately throws up a red flag. Why are they acting this way? Are they potentially involved in this crime? Do they dislike, a person enough to commit an act of violence? And in this case, you're wondering, could this sister have engaged in something violent towards this couple?
But some things just don't add up with this theory. The eyewitness said she saw a man between 20 and 30 years old fleeing the scene, not a middle-aged woman. And she said this happened at 7:45 a.m.
Katie actually lived pretty much next door to me. She is a bus driver for this same school district, and she drove the bus past my house every morning. So we were able to confirm with the bus garage that yes, Katie showed up to work, she came on time, and she was driving her bus. And there just wasn't time during a bus route for her to stop at the house and commit this murder.
Detectives consider a different theory.
I know that she didn't commit the homicide, but maybe the husband decided to do it. Through police reports, we know that David drank. We believe he had a drinking problem. And we know that there's a lot of, domestic violence in that home. There was a lot of hate. There was a lot of discontent within that family circle. So if you want to keep your wife happy, you want to keep your family happy, you're going to want to do something to help her.
David was quiet to Katie's, more bombastic, volatile personality, but nobody had any doubt that if she'd asked him to do this, that he would have done that for her.
With David now in their crosshairs, detectives put the timeline to the test to determine where he was when the Tarwackis were killed.
I believe from the timeline that we built up, we know that the morning of the homicides, David had to take the kids to the babysitters. He says he was there at 7:30 a.m. dropping the kids off. We go to the babysitter, and we were able to substantiate his whereabouts. He works in South Bend, so it takes him almost 20 minutes to get to work. He started work at 8 a.m. We follow up on his work. We know that at that work, they actually have palm scanners to get into the building. We know that he put his palm there, that he scanned his palm, and we know that he was at work. So there was no way that he would have been the killer, that he was involved.
Having eliminated from the suspect pool all three of the people closest to the Tarwackis, detectives are stumped.
There were so many things about this case that didn't flow up from a normal investigative standpoint. We were still really focused at that point on this is somebody that they knew, somebody that was angry with them. And we had talked to everybody that we knew that knew John and Carolyn. We talked to John's, ex-wives. We dug deep into his past trying to find a motive, and just nothing was panning out. Everything was coming up a dead end.
Investigators are forced to consider whether the murders may have been more random than they first appeared.
People were terrified. People need a reason that bad things happen. When there's no reason that something bad has happened, then everybody thinks, then that could be me. And that freaks people out, obviously. We all like to believe that if we just do the right thing at the right time, then we're all safe, but that's not clearly how the world works.
Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. And eventually, the case goes cold.
That was the first time that I ever had trouble sleeping after a case. It was awful. It was awful because it was unsolved and just no idea at that point. And the other thing that haunts you is, did you miss something?
As it turns out, they did.
I received a call from the mother, Sharon McKnight, who is cleaning out the house to sell. She is cleaning out the refrigerator, thawing out the freezer, and as she's removing items, she says she found a bloody knife. I was actually here at work. I immediately respond to the location along with one of my troopers. Sure enough, there's a bloody knife in the freezer.
Investigators have just discovered that they missed a key piece of evidence while processing the murder scene of Carolyn and John Tarwacki, a bloody knife.
The sickness feeling that goes over you is like, wow, how did we miss that? We missed it. So, I'm the lead investigator. I have to take responsibility for everything that goes wrong. So, yeah, it's my responsibility to make sure everything was done. It wasn't done properly. The knife is processed. DNA shows that it is Carolyn and it is John's blood on the knife. But unfortunately, there is no third party. We were hoping maybe to find DNA from our suspect that could be identified, but there was not.
Just when things couldn't seem more hopeless, Detective Suarez receives a call that breathes new life into the investigation.
Patricia Wiles, with a local young lady, she had a run-in with the local police officer. She was stopped. She was arrested, I believe, for driving while her license suspended. When they brought her in and they booked her, she told them, I'd like to talk to the detective who's in charge of the Tarwacki homicide because I think I have information as to who killed him. This officer obviously calls me right away at home. I believe it was 3 in the morning or something like that. So I obviously come to work right away. I start interviewing Patricia Wiles, and she brings up the name of Keith Lince. Keith Lince, who we had talked to initially, but was not on the radar.
26-year-old Keith Lince was someone they interviewed on the very first day of the investigation. His mother, Sherry, told them Keith was at home with her at the time of the murder. And back then, they had no reason to doubt her.
Patricia tells us that she was living with Keith Lince's brother or half-brother. And on the night of the homicide, she came to the trailer, and she said Keith was just bouncing all over the place. And kept looking out the window, and she asked him, "What are you doing?" She said, "The cops are after me." And, well, why are the cops after you? And she said, because I left my effing footprints in the yard, and they're gonna find me.
Patricia tells them that Keith was heavily into crystal meth, and that night, she was afraid of him.
So when you take crystal meth, what it can do is it can cause agitation, it can cause people to experience suspicious thoughts, paranoia, and sometimes people even start to see or hear things that aren't there. And all of this combined can make social interactions to be very unpredictable with these people. They become very emotionally disinhibited, emotionally dysregulated, and sometimes engage in erratic behavior and, in some cases, explosive violence.
One of Patricia Wild's big alarming concerns was just the way Keith was acting. He was acting berserk, and she said he had a gun in one hand, was waving it around, but she also observed him with a couple other weapons in his belt line.
That's started the ball rolling with Keith Lince, and we really started to dig in on him as our main suspect.
To confirm Patricia's story, Detective Suarez tracks down Keith's baby mama. She's in bad shape.
It turns out that within a month or so, I believe, of the homicides, Keith had choked her, beat her, choked her, and we were able to confirm this through South Bend Police Department records, that we obviously now know he's got the propensity for violence. Now that we really got our teeth sunk into Keith Lince, we start looking for his inner circle. We start getting more calls. The next big break really comes from another ex-girlfriend. She had a birthday party for one of her sons, and the mother told her, why do you have Keith Lince here? He killed the Tarwackis. Get him out of my home. I don't want him in my house. So that started a fight. She said she asked him, why do people think you killed the Tarwackis? And he told her, well, because they found my footprints there, but I was just taking a shortcut to my grandparents' house.
It seemed believable. If you're gonna make a story up, why do you make the footprints in the snow up? Because we never had released that and people didn't know we had that as evidence.
Detectives now strongly believe Keith murdered Carolyn and John Tarwacki, but they need proof. They go back to Sherry Lince, hoping to break his alibi. She reiterates that Keith was sleeping on the couch at 8 a.m. and that she drove him to work at 9.
So now we're working on it. We have to confirm his timeline. And at that time, he was working at Walmart in Mishawaka, Indiana. We were able to determine through work records that was not true. He never did show up for work. He didn't call in sick. He didn't call in at all. So we know that he's not there. We believe Mom's lying.
If only detectives had checked Keith's alibi back on day 1 of the investigation, they would have realized that he had both the means and the opportunity to kill the Tarwackis.
It's not uncommon to see in a lot of cases that go cold, in this case 3 years. And it doesn't matter if it's 3 months, 3 years, 30 years. I'll often tell investigators, the name of the offender is probably already in the file. He's probably already even been interviewed and falsely or wrongly screened out or excluded. And I say, always go back to what you did first and re-examine it with fresh eyes. And we see in this case, sure enough, he's spoken to in the canvas and not asked the right questions and ruled out.
Obviously, Keith is on the radar now. We tried looking for his whereabouts. We find out that Keith has fled to Nashville, Tennessee. The next day, I had to go to the doctor. My blood pressure was 200/195. We have to track him down. If Keith did this, he needs to pay for it.
Investigators believe Keith Lince killed Carolyn and John Tarwacki. After an exhaustive search, they finally track him down in a Nashville jail, imprisoned on some minor traffic charges.
So Keith and I have history. He doesn't like me, I don't like him. There comes a point in time where you really have to suck up your ego as an investigator. As much as I want to go interview Keith, I know that if I go, he's not going to say a thing. So I sent a couple other detectives to talk to him. They do lengthy interviews with him. He denies being involved. But he also thinks that he can beat a polygraph, and he volunteers to take polygraphs. He failed both tests miserably. So we know that Keith is our main suspect, but we don't have that final nail in the coffin.
But then, they get a phone call from a man by the name of Shane Zimmerman. He says he's got information about the homicide.
Shane Zimmerman is hitting the lotto, hitting all 7 numbers in the Powerball. It's just something that you don't expect out of the blue to come, even though we are on the right trail.
Shane Zimmerman describes himself as a childhood friend of the prime suspect, Keith Lince, who just happens to be sharing a cell with him at this very moment.
Shane says, Keith told me he did it. He can't take it back, but he says he did it, and he was crying one night. He's in his bunk crying. And Shane says, what's wrong? He says, I killed him. I killed those people. He goes, they didn't deserve to die, but I can't take it back.
In order to secure a conviction, investigators need Keith's confession on tape.
Shane Zimmerman didn't want anything. He said, I've screwed up my entire life. He goes, for once in my life, I'm going to do something right.
Shane agrees to wear a wire and heads back into the cell.
But we told him, don't ask questions, you don't interrogate, you don't interview. You just act as a listening post. If he wants to talk about it, you talk, you listen.
On their end, police push Keith in a series of interviews, keeping the murders at the top of his mind.
They said, hey, Keith, we know sometimes you can go into drug-induced hysteria, and this is what happened in this case, isn't it? And, you know, obviously he denied it there, but when he went back into the cell and was talking to Shane, he told Shane, he goes, man, they had it right on. That's what happened.
Finally, Keith breaks down and spills the whole story of the murder to Shane.
Zimmerman was a hammer that we hammered that nail home, so it was incredible stroke of luck.
With their informant's help, investigators are able to piece together John and Carolyn's final 24 hours.
We find out that Keith and his brother, Brian, are drinking all night long. They're doing drugs the entire night. That morning of the murders, Keith gets in a fight with the mother because he wants more money to go buy drugs. And this is very early in the morning prior to the homicides. We believe that after the mother would not give Keith money, he probably planned on doing a home invasion.
John is in getting ready for work. He is shaving. Carolyn's on her computer at 7:03. And sometime between there and 7:45, Keith Lince is walking down the road and walks down that back alley.
He may have seen this house that looked like an easy target. Knowing the area, he walks around to the back. He then goes in the house. Keith used to have pit bulls. This guy was not scared of dogs. He lets Wrigley, the dog, into the back room and closes the door behind him. I don't think he was expecting for John and Carolyn to be home.
Especially if the dog was like in the back. Maybe he thought, oh, these people are gone. Maybe there's nobody home.
I believe that she saw Keith coming in through the back door. Keith already had his gun out. He may have been doing, obviously, meth and maybe some coke or crack. I believe that she screams. John comes out of the bathroom, encounters Keith. He was just out of his mind. I don't think that he went in there with the intent to murder anyone. I think he went in there with the intent to rob. And all of a sudden, he'd just been confronted by 2 people, and it's a fight or flight, and he decided to kill them both.
I think my biggest takeaway from this case was not to prejudge what you may see at a scene. This case would suggest that maybe there was emotion here that had evolved to a certain level where people got angry and perpetrated violence. And really what it says to me is sometimes, by sheer happenstance or drug use, it can culminate in explosive violence in a way that seems personal when really it's just disorganized, frantic, unexplainable behavior.
Keith is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He's convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
The timeline was incredibly important because you had this 35, 40-minute window where this crime occurred. And putting together this timeline made it absolutely clear when we caught the guy who it was.
As the father, John Tarwacki, said, there is no closure, and I also believe there is no closure. You may get a conviction, but it's not going to bring your kid back. It's not going to change anything. Every time Christmas comes around, every time a birthday comes around, they're not going to be there.
But what sticks with me most about this case is just how senseless it was. These were 2 normal people getting ready for work, and somebody made up their mind that they wanted something and was going to do whatever they could to get it. It's senseless. It made no sense. And it still doesn't, even after all this time. I don't know how you recover from that.
He was shot minutes before he walked in the door, which is scary. What would have happened if we were there?
A vicious murder.
It was obvious whoever wanted to kill him was very angry because they probably could have shot him 1 or twice, but they had emptied their magazine into him.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
They just didn't get along. They were fighting all the time.
Maybe an argument took place. Maybe there was disagreement took place.
Said, hey, what are you looking at? You're staring at me. And he pulled out a gun.
The truth will be revealed.
We know that last phone call actually came from after John was already found dead. So I think that phone call came from the guy that killed him.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Sylvania Township, a quaint, close-knit town bordering Toledo, Ohio.
People are happy out here. In Christmas time, the neighborhoods are all lit up. You could tell the festivities for the holidays are coming around. Every neighborhood tries to outdo the next neighborhood.
We've always been fairly lucky. We haven't had that many homicides. Probably the majority of calls that we get are domestic violences, and we get a lot of burglary calls.
But on a quiet afternoon, just 10 days before Christmas, 2 young girls make a grisly discovery.
I was 13, and my sister Nicole was 12. We were both in the same school at the time. We were the last kids off the bus, and we got home, our dad's car's in the driveway. I thought, I forgot my keys in the house, and thank God Dad's home. So we try to walk in the front door. Front door is locked. Okay, maybe he's napping. Knock on the door, nothing. I go to the back door, still no answer. We look inside, try to see what was going on. My sister Nicole says, Dad's on the floor. I was like, what do you mean he's on the floor? She goes, Dad's on the floor, he's not moving. There's a front window on the house. There wasn't a lock on it, so I pushed the window open and got my sister inside. She unlocked the front door, and we looked at our dad. He wasn't breathing, he was blue. At first, we thought he actually had committed suicide. I dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
My dad is on the floor of the house. He's all bloody.
Okay, first off, we need you to relax. Is your dad conscious?
Oh, he's passed out. He's on the floor.
Is he breathing?
No, he's not. Nicole, go check on him. He's bleeding. He's bleeding.
Where is your dad bleeding?
I think my dad is dead.
I was scared, 'cause I didn't know what was going on. The 911 operator told us we needed to go outside, because of course she doesn't know what's going on. And within minutes, we had police officers in our driveway.
Veteran homicide detectives Todd Slayman and Robert Caldwell are called to the scene to investigate.
When the 911 call came in, I was actually sitting in my office in the detective bureau, and originally I was told by the dispatcher that there was a possible suicide. And then shortly after that, there was an update, possibly that this was a homicide. So that led us to believe that this is not going to be a standard run-of-the-mill investigation. When we first arrived on the scene, Mr. Reeby was laying there on the floor. He was on his side, face down. There was a guitar that was laying there by the body, so you could tell this was not a suicide. He was shot 7 times. He had several bullet wounds. Some of the wounds hit his shoulder, one wound hit his hip, but the wound that really killed him, it hit him directly right in the heart.
This crime stood out. That John Reeby was shot this many times in the middle of the daytime, that stood out. It was the violence of it.
When we see someone shot 7 times, this is overkill. Many firearms actually only have a magazine that will hold 6 or 7 rounds. So someone literally emptied a gun into this man. That is not a restrained, tactical murder. That is a rage murder.
John Reeby was a 39-year-old single father, taking care of his 2 daughters.
Oh, my dad was the normal, guy, loved football. He was a bowler, he golfed. He was very family-oriented. He loved spending time with us, doing things with my sister and I. He was a great guy. He met my mom at a gas station. And he said, "Nice truck." And they swapped numbers, and then they dated about 5 years before they got married, and then I was born 3 years later. And my sister 15 months after that. It was more him doing everything for us. My mom wasn't in the picture as much as she should have been. My dad just finally said enough's enough and leave, and I'll raise the kids myself.
John was self-employed as a heating and air conditioning installer. Money was tight, but he did everything he could to provide for his daughters.
My dad loved Christmas. We were supposed to go get a Christmas tree that night. Our house was actually a pretty small house, but every year, my dad always got the biggest, bushiest tree that he could find. He would get up in the morning and cook breakfast, like a big breakfast. Always said breakfast before presents. It was awesome. He loved it. When they told us that he was shot, I was shocked. Like, what do you mean? No, that can't be possible. Who would do it? And, I just wanted to know why somebody would do that to my dad.
To find John Reeby's killer, detectives must unravel the last 24 hours of his life, beginning with the crime scene.
We started processing the scene, and we found casings on the floor, gunshot casings. The casings have the caliber of the gun on the back of the casings.
It was a .380 semi-automatic weapon. They're small guns you could just carry in your pocket. So we knew what kind of gun we were looking for at that point in time.
When they scour the house, police don't locate the gun, but they do make some important discoveries.
There was no sign of a struggle. John was, we're assuming he was playing the guitar. He was probably sitting. So John may have not known it was coming, and there was no signs of any forced entry. So we believe whoever shot John Reeby may have known.
At the scene, the blood that was on the body was not dry, and his body was still somewhat limber. The flesh was still soft. That led us to believe the crime was fairly recent. It definitely happened in the last couple hours.
Detectives talked to John's daughters, hoping to pin down his final movements in the hours before his murder.
That day, my sister and I, we got up for school, and the normal, brush your teeth, eat. Dad's saying, grab your backpack, don't miss the bus. He told us, I'm going to work. I should be home when you guys get home. We said, okay, have a good day.
After school let out, they got on the bus and were dropped off near their house at approximately 3:15 p.m. that day.
At 3:22, 7 minutes later, the 911 call comes in from Jamie and Nicole finding their dad dead, shot 7 times. We're looking back and putting the whole timeline together.
From John's daughter's information and the state of the body at the crime scene, detectives believe John was killed between 8 a.m. when the girls left for school and 3:21 p.m. when they found him dead on the floor.
The detectives wanted to know, do you have any clue what your dad did today? I'm like, no, I was at school. He said he was going to work. I'm not sure if he did.
Needing to pin down John's movements that day, investigators turned to his friend, Eric Babis, who sometimes assisted him at work.
Eric Babos was the handyman for John Reeby and the jobs that he did for the air conditioning and heating company. Eric and John went to high school together, so they were longtime friends.
Eric Babis was low-key. He was wanting to give us information. He wanted to help us.
But Eric tells detectives he didn't see or talk to John the day of the murder.
Eric advised us December the 15th. John was not working, and he was taking that day off. And Eric was working at his brother's house, which is about 3.5, 4 miles away from John Reeby's house. He advised us he'd been there all day. With no leads from Eric, detectives turn their attention to John's estranged wife, Lisa.
An ex-wife, an ex-husband, an estranged spouse. This is someone who, in most circumstances, needs to be excluded as being a suspect and as a person of interest almost by default. You need to look at what were the dynamics of this relationship. What were any strains or stresses on the relationship?
What we heard from the girls is that, they just didn't get along. They were fighting all the time.
My mom was around for birthdays and Christmases and holidays. They kept in touch because, we're her kids, but there's a lot of fighting.
Maybe there was some sort of vendetta or personal argument that had evolved to a certain level where she got angry and perpetrated violence that erupted in this horrible killing.
Hours after John Reeby is found dead, police question his estranged wife, Lisa.
Lisa was very upset. She was emotionally distraught seeing her daughters in that state of being so upset. She was visibly shaken.
Some suspects will go too far, will go over the top. Excessive grief, excessive theatricality. It can have a number of motives behind it, but everyone deals with grief differently. So without knowing what that person's baseline responses to trauma and what their triggers are, you always need to dig deeper.
To find out whether Lisa could have killed John, investigators need to establish motive and whether she had the opportunity.
Maybe there was some kind of domestic issue between the two of them. We're looking to find out where was she that day, what was she doing that day, was she the last person to see John?
Lisa said that she last talked to John around 11:46 that morning.
With this new piece of information, detectives rework the timeline for the hours before John's murder.
A phone call can help build a victim's timeline, much like any device-related activity. It leaves a trail. It provides a definitive place where they are last seen and heard from. And the contents of that communication can also be very important.
They had talked about going out, possibly next night getting some Christmas gifts for the girls. She said that there was no duress, no anger.
Detectives look into Lisa's story and work to verify her alibi.
Lisa was a receptionist, and Lisa said that she was at work that day.
There was a couple witnesses there that had said, yep, she was there at the time frame that we were looking at.
And when the girls called her and told her what was going on, she left early and went right over to John's house.
With Lisa at work all day, detectives determined she couldn't be involved in John's murder, and she's no longer considered a suspect.
They were separated, but Lisa would describe John as a good father. He took care of the girls. You come into a lot of homes where the common denominator is the kids. I think John and Lisa had that type of relationship.
Lisa then offers up a piece of information that sheds new light on the investigation.
Well, in the meantime, she had checked her phone messages and she had realized that John had left her 2 voice messages just, a minute before 3 o'clock that day. And she played both those messages for us.
John Reeby had called his ex-wife on the day of the murder and left a message asking her if she could go to the heating and air conditioning business in Toledo and pick up a check that was waiting for him for a project that he had done earlier in the week.
And then within a minute and a half, he called right back and says, hey, Lisa, someone is waiting for his money. I need you to go pick up this check.
There was a level of urgency to the second phone call.
Lisa, hurry up. Call me
His
back.
voice was definitely, higher pitched. It was more, hey, Lisa, why haven't you called me back? I need you. I'll explain it to you. But I need you to call me back. I got someone here waiting. So, yeah, there was definitely a different tone.
This was before cell phones really had taken off, so a lot of this was landlines, and you knew exactly where the person was. John had called her from his house at that time.
These phone calls are a significant development in the case and further narrow down the timeline.
From the phone calls, we know that John was alive at 2:58. We know that John was alive at 2:59. We know John was found dead at 3:21. So whoever shot and killed John, it was in that timeline. Now we have a 22-minute time frame that we're dealing with.
But it's what detectives hear next that turns the case on its head.
At the 2:59 phone call, you could hear something in the background. You could hear a second male's voice. That's when you can hear John say, I got someone here.
So we know he's in the house with someone, and that someone is probably the person that killed John, because 20 minutes from that message, he's found dead by his 2 daughters.
Detectives now believe if they can identify the background voice on the phone message, they'll find their killer.
At that particular time, I was involved with an FBI task force in Northwest Ohio, and we had access to Quantico, Virginia, through our office. So we sent the tapes to Quantico to try to get them enhanced so they can identify who's in the background.
The FBI had voice analysis that the FBI was unable to determine who that person was.
Getting no more information about the background voice, detectives ask Lisa, John's ex, about his enemies.
Lisa advises that the only person John had arguments with was Chuck from the heating and air conditioning company that John had subcontracted for. Chuck owed John some money for completing the job. John was very upset. Maybe an argument took place, maybe there was disagreement took place, so Chuck became a person of interest at that time.
He did owe my dad money. from just previous jobs. I didn't know if there was like something going on with them.
Chuck is the owner of an HVAC company located just a few miles from John's home. With suspicion starting to swirl around him, detectives pay a visit to Chuck's business.
He was the guy that was in charge, very confident of himself, and he definitely wanted things done his way.
When police ask about his relationship with John, Chuck admits to owing him $500.
Chuck dealt with subcontractors, and he had learned that you don't pay your subcontractors until the job's done, or else they wouldn't complete the project. He thought not only John, but with all other subcontractors, if you prepaid them, they wouldn't get the job done.
But Chuck said that John had completed the job a week before, and he actually had a check waiting for him.
Chuck tells detectives about a series of phone calls he had with John, all near the time of John's death.
The first phone call, I believe, was at 3:03, and John wanted to know if he could come send someone else to pick the checks up. And Chuck said, no, you have to come down and get the checks. There was another phone call at 3:05. John was saying, hey, can I send someone else down? No, you can't. You have to come down and get the check.
8 minutes later, the phone rang again.
The next phone call, there were two voices on the phone. And the second voice says, hey, John owes me money, it's $150, so I'm gonna come down and get the check. That call was at 3:13, and that's the one where Chuck said to the guy, hey, I told you before, I'm not changing my mind. John has to come down and get the check. The phone went dead. He actually hung up on him.
Chuck tells detectives he didn't recognize the other person on the phone. He shares his company's phone records to prove he's telling the truth.
Chuck said he was in his office that day, and he was with his employee. The phone records tell us that they had multiple phone calls, so we knew they were at their business.
With the company's phone records and Chuck's statements clearing him from the murder, detectives Caldwell and Slayman now look at the implications of his story.
We narrowed down the time frame from the phone calls. So now we got an 8-minute time frame that we're dealing with.
The timeline in this case is remarkably tight. We have a series of telephone calls, and then minutes later, his two daughters coming home. You can't help but question whether his daughters actually crossed paths with the killer. And if they were just a couple of minutes earlier, if they too would have been victims themselves.
He was shot minutes before he walked in the door, which is scary. What if the bus had gone a different route that day and we get dropped off first instead of last? We could have been there, walking in the door. Like, what would have happened if we were there?
Working with a timeline of just 8 minutes, from 3:13 to 3:21 p.m., detectives need to uncover the identity of the man with John, the afternoon he was murdered.
What are the odds that somebody else gained access to the home and killed him in that same length of time and was still able to escape? It really leaves only one possibility, and that's the other man that was on the phone at 3:13.
It was an incredibly tight timeline at this point, and now it's just a matter of trying to figure out who that person that was in the house.
As business owner Chuck is wrapping up his interview, he drops a bombshell, telling police that at 4:06 p.m., he received a final call.
Chuck says it's the same person. So the same guy calls again and says, hey, John's in the hospital. I need to come down and get the check. And that's when Chuck said, when John's out of the hospital, he can come get it. Not that Chuck believed him.
That last phone call came in after John was already found dead. Chuck told us that was the same guy that was connected with those other calls from John Reeby's house. So we believe that last phone call came from the person that killed John.
As police wait for a trace on the phone call, they circle back to the crime scene, looking for any new clues.
The girls never seen anybody leaving as they were coming home. We talked to the bus driver. The bus driver didn't remember seeing anybody leaving the scene.
Where the house was, It was a very busy road. We combed the neighborhood, and no one saw or heard anything.
With no new witnesses or leads, the investigation hits a wall.
You get a little setback. It'd be much easier in the case if, neighbor 2 doors down would have said, hey, I saw this guy running out of the house. That would have been huge. But there was nothing. It was extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult.
Then they get an unexpected break.
I got a phone call from Eric Babis. He advised me that he might have some information that would assist in our investigation.
Eric tells police he had been at a party at John's house the Friday before his murder, when a man came in he didn't recognize.
He told us that there was a guy that came in there and he was delivering drugs and said that his name was JR. And then when he was leaving, JR said, hey, what are you looking at? You're staring at me. And he pulled out a gun and he pointed it at John and Eric and threatened them.
John Reeby was a dedicated father. He took care of his daughters. But John Reeby also liked to party. He liked the nightlife. He drank. He used drugs on occasion.
We got John's phone to see who he had talked to the day of the 15th. When we were looking at phone records, we could see that John had called JR.
Detectives now zero in on a new suspect in John's murder, local drug dealer, JR.
Sylvania Township police detectives, when they were told that JR was a drug dealer, they thought that perhaps he had something to do with the crime. And maybe John Reeby owed him money for the drugs.
Police ask John's friend Eric to come down to the station again, hoping he can help identify JR.
Eric described him as a big guy. He was imposing, kind of short-cropped hair, well-built, and he brandished a gun, but he didn't recognize him.
When detectives run the name JR through the database, they discover his real name is Valen Rogers, and he's been arrested for an unrelated crime.
So myself and Sergeant Colwell, we went down to Lucas County Sheriff's Department and we did an interview with him in a back conference room. And we actually sat and talked with Valen Rogers about John Reeby. Valen Rogers was a big guy. He took care of himself. He obviously worked out.
When detectives question Valen about the day of John's murder, he says he was visiting a friend 11 miles away.
According to Valen, the last time he spoke with John was on the 10th. That was the last time he said he's seen him alive. The day of the homicide, John was trying to score some dope, and it called Valen Rogers, but they never connected.
From the phone records, you could see where it went to voicemail, so we knew that information that Valen Rogers was giving us was true.
Valen also denies waving a gun around at John's party.
Valen says, I was at the party, I scored. I scored some dope for John, I was in and out. He said he liked John Reeby. He said he always had the money, it was a simple transaction. Why would I kill him?
Detectives track down friends of Valen Rogers, and they confirm they were with him in another town until 4 p.m. on the day John was murdered. Detectives also look closer at Rogers' activities the night of the party.
There was another person that Eric said was at the party, so we called him up and basically said, hey, can you come in and talk to us for a little bit? And we asked him, did some guy come there and deliver drugs? He said, oh yeah, some guy came, he brought some drugs, and asked him, did he pull out a gun and threaten you guys? And he said, no, there was no guy with a gun. So at that point, we knew that the story that Eric Babis came to tell us that night was a complete lie.
Now investigators turn their attention to John's longtime friend, Eric Babis, and discover he's got a criminal past.
He had a drug and alcohol problem. He had a DUI arrest. He had a temper problem. He had domestic violences. His wife had moved out on him. His kid wasn't staying with him anymore. He was a guy that was, kind of down and out.
My dad helped him out a lot. Like, he had a kid younger than us, and my dad helped him. Like, hey, I know you don't have any work right now. You can help me out, and I'll pay you to, grab my tools, help me carry things.
The more detectives learn about Eric, the more red flags they find.
The girls thought Eric was not a good influence on their dad. You know, he partied too much, and they never liked him. They thought he acted strange around them.
He was kind of weird, but not anything where I thought he would ever do anything like this. Like, shoot my dad.
Investigators have zeroed in on John Reeby's longtime friend, Eric Babis, as their prime suspect in his murder.
Eric's alibi was that he was renovating his brother's house. It was on West Acre, which is about, 3.5, 4 miles from the crime scene. And he said he was dropped off by his father around 10-ish and picked up by his brother around 4:30 that afternoon, and he had never left the house.
Detectives Caldwell and Slayman reach out to Eric's family, asking if they can confirm the handyman's alibi.
They were saying, yeah, we dropped him off and picked him up. But during the time frame of the murder, he's unaccounted for.
Eric Babos was at the house alone the whole day, and so he couldn't get anyone to substantiate the alibi that he was there. He could have at any time gotten a ride from somebody else, ridden his bike, or walked to John Reeby's house.
Through John's phone records, detectives catch Eric in another lie.
Eric said that he had last spoken with John the day before the homicide, and that he had not been there that day, he had not talked to John that day. But from the phone records, that's a lie. He spoke to John the day of the homicide. He spoke to him in the morning, around 8 in the morning. Then he called him around 11-ish.
Investigators confront Eric with this information, and his story changes.
He admitted to us that he did talk to John that morning, and he said he wanted to know if they were going to go work that day. Eric said John told him, I'm going to have some coffee. I'm going to, see what's going on. I don't know if we're working today or not. And then Eric said, we got to get paid. And John said, I'll get with you later on it. So we knew they were talking to each other on the phone.
Once you start lying to investigators, they are going to lay hard on that person and start to look at everything they've said, and they're going to keep digging.
Suspicion about Eric keeps growing as Jamie remembers something unusual that happened the day of her father's murder.
Eric called my house and actually asked for my dad, and I said, well, no, my dad can't come to the phone right now, something's going on. And he's saying, I want my money, I want my money. It's $150. Like, why? All of a sudden you're calling and asking for money?
Now you know what the motive could be about the shooting that has to do with this check or this money.
Eric said he called because he wanted to get the $150 because he promised his son that he was going to take him Christmas shopping. So he wanted that money right away.
We know that John called Lisa before 3 o'clock that day and left her a voice message and said there was a guy waiting there and he's waiting to get his money. Now we find out Eric wanted to get his money. So Eric Babis actually kind of gave us his motive.
Who else had motive? Who else knew about the $150? John knew about it and Eric knew about it. Who profited from it? Eric. Eric's got something to cover up. He's not being forthcoming. It's that standoffish attitude where, I'm slouched in my chair. He was kind of cold. His only alibi is I wasn't there. It wasn't me.
Having identified a motive, detectives take a closer look at Eric's movements on the day John was killed.
We went to his brother's house where he was supposed to be working that day to see if there was work going on, those kind of things. It was kind of unusual because there was a bike in the side yard there, and you could tell by the tracks and the snow and that someone had been riding that bike in the last day. I actually had my son, who was 11 years old at the time, and I had him ride a bicycle from Eric's brother's house to John Reeby's house and timed him. And there's 2 or 3 different ways you could go to do it, and my son was able to do it in about 20, 25 minutes. So we knew Eric could do it easily there back.
John was killed in between 3:13 and 3:21 in the afternoon, and Eric Babis's alibi for that time frame isn't holding up.
He puts himself at this house doing work. He said he was going out back and forth, taking stuff out to the trash can. We checked both the neighbors that were next to this house, and I said, did you ever see Eric Babis there? And these people knew Eric, you know, because he had actually lived in that house for a while. And they said, no, we never saw Eric that day.
With Eric in their crosshairs, detectives get a search warrant for his home and phone, looking for evidence that connects him to John's murder.
Well, he was searching for anything, a gun or clothing items with some blood stains or something. Maybe it was on a clothes, maybe unaccounted for money, maybe a check stub, or anything that can link to the crime.
But investigators aren't able to locate the gun that killed John Reeby, or any items that yield physical evidence.
It would be pretty rare or stupid of someone to shoot somebody 7 times and then hold on to that gun. That gun, I'm sure, is in a river somewhere.
I'm still thinking it's not real. Like, why is this happening? You know, waiting for answers, waiting for what really happened. So pretty much twisted our whole world around. It's horrible.
While detectives have established that Eric had the motive and opportunity to kill John, they don't have physical evidence tying him to the murder. They revisit the timeline and learn that at 4:15 p.m., Eric's brother took him to the bank and hardware store after picking him up that day.
There was a video camera at the bank, and there was a video camera at the department store he was in.
The police detectives were able to determine what Eric Babis was wearing that day through video that was taken.
Detectives get another search warrant, this one specifically for the clothing Eric was wearing on December 15th, the day of the crime.
We sent that shirt that he was wearing to the lab, and that came back with gunshot residue on that.
So you have gunshot residue on a garment, and you don't have a gun. Well, gunshot residue is actually very important. It's pointing you at least in the right direction.
It was on the left sleeve, which made sense because the way the gun would reject, it would probably spray his left sleeve. I mean, this was an investigator's dream.
After discovering physical evidence linking Eric to the murder of John Reeby, detectives Caldwell and Slayman set a trap for their prime suspect.
We asked Eric Babis, would there be a reason, you know, you would have something on that shirt? You know, do you sport shoot, or, you know, do you skeet shoot? Are you a hunter or something like that? No, I don't do anything. I don't own any guns. You know, he locked himself into that.
Investigators are certain Eric is their killer, but they still don't have enough evidence to make an arrest.
You don't always have an offender on video pulling the trigger. You don't always have DNA. Cases are built a brick at a time, and when you don't have enough circumstantial evidence, that's when you may not get convictions.
Detectives Slayman and Caldwell fear Eric might get away with murder. Then they get the break they've been waiting for.
Chuck had advised us that there was that last phone call where someone was trying to get paid, trying to get the money. So when we got Eric's phone records for December the 15th, we saw that that phone call actually came from Eric Babis' cell phone. He called and asked for the money again. So that last phone call that after John was already found dead came from Eric's phone.
That was huge. That was a huge significant break in the case because now we have Eric Babis that's been identified by Chuck. He said, that's the same person who said, I want to come down and get the check. There's only one person that was connected to that, John's helper, Eric Babis.
On December 29, 2004, just 4 days after Christmas, detectives arrest Eric Babis for John Reeby's murder.
We went and knocked at the door, and I remember he came down, walked down the steps and sat on the steps. And we told him we would arrest for aggravated murder. And he just got up and put his hands behind his back. And that 100% reinforced we had the right guy. It was Eric Babis.
Detectives are now able to reconstruct the final 24 hours of John's life.
The morning of the homicide, John Reeby gets his kids off to school. Around 8 o'clock, he gets them off to the bus and that. And he spoke to Lisa around 11:46 that morning. John, stays in, and he's got that urge to party a little bit. So John called Valen Rogers, but they never connected. 2 o'clock, Eric, who's been dropped off at his brother's house on West Acre, decides, I'm gonna go over there, I'm gonna confront John because I want my money. During that time, before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eric gets inside the house and confronts John. Hey, I need this $150. We did a job for you, I worked for you, I want my money.
John at that time tried to appease him and reached out to the ex-wife, Lisa, to see if she would go get the money. And he was unable to make contact with her. At that point in time, John called Chuck to see if it would be okay if his helper, Eric, could just go pick up the money, and then he was advised that John had to sign off on the check. Eric didn't believe that, so John called back again, and this time he actually handed the phone to Eric Babis, and they asked Chuck to explain to him why he couldn't come get the money himself.
We think right in that time, right around 3:13, either John is deceased or John's going to be dead. Because at 3:21, Jamie and Nicole find their dad dead. There's a 4th phone call at 4:06 where Chuck from the heating and air conditioning place picks up, and it's Eric Babis saying, hey, I'm John's helper. John owes me money. Can I come get the checkup? No, John has to come. There's absolutely no doubt in that case that Eric Babis shot John Reeby 7 times, over $150.
I think money was really just the rationalization. It was about ego and proving a point. No one was going to deny him that amount of money, whether it was $150 or $150,000. And at the end of the day, what we're dealing with here is actually someone with sociopathic tendencies who could rationalize in their twisted mind that that was a logical outcome.
Eric's known us since we were born. So it's not like he didn't know us. We had enough interaction with him. It wasn't anything like this random guy, random person who's upset about something, who killed my dad. No, I'll never forgive him. I'll always be angry.
On August 5th, 2005, a jury finds Eric Babis guilty of the murder of John Reeby and sentence him to life in prison.
My dad and Eric have been friends since high school. Like, how could you do that to somebody you've known most of your life? And my dad helped them out a lot. So, like, why? Do you not have a heart?
The timeline was everything. I can't remember in my 38 years a case having such a close timeline. You almost never get something like that. Everything played out. You could match the crime to the time, to the phone calls, the 911 calls. It all fit together very tightly. It's good when we find that little piece of evidence, that little clue that you can climb the ladder and solve a case and bring closure. Everybody wants to know what happened. So you're serving the community, you're serving people, you're helping people.
This case is one of tragedy. It's Christmas time. You have a father murdered, leaving 2 daughters fatherless. A family is destroyed, reduced to ruins. Very, very difficult.
My dad was a great dad. He's a hard worker. But I miss his goofiness and his singing in the car. That's what I miss the most. It's hard knowing my kids won't know him. And my son actually asks about him because he sees pictures of him. And it's hard. Then he's like, who's that? Oh, that's Grandpa. Where's Grandpa? It's hard to explain. And Christmas is hard, but we just try to make the best of it. I'll still always remember my dad.
I can't imagine being that age and finding my father shot and killed. No matter how bad the circumstances are, people want to know the truth. And I think we served them well. They have closure. They can put it to bed. They can go on with their lives.